At exactly 2:17 a.m. on a cold November morning in 1977, television broadcasts across southern England were interrupted without warning. There was no emergency signal, no test pattern, no explanation. The broadcast simply stopped, and then a voice replaced it. Not a warning, not a threat. A voice that spoke as if it expected to be understood. The transmission lasted less than 6 minutes. When it ended, broadcasters resumed normal programming as though nothing unusual had occurred. Within hours, officials dismissed the incident as a technical malfunction. In public records, it was reduced to a footnote, but decades later, internal documents would reveal something unsettling. The broadcast was never traced to an external signal. It appeared to originate from inside the system itself. This is Case File 21. Viewers who witnessed the interruption later described the voice as calm, measured, and unmistakably human. It did not shout, it did not threaten, it did not introduce itself in any conventional way. It spoke with certainty, as though the listener already knew why it was there. Eyewitness accounts collected years later reveal a striking consistency. As the voice spoke, rooms reportedly became unnaturally still. Pets stopped moving. Some viewers said they forgot to blink. Others described a sensation of pressure behind the eyes, as if concentrating without intending to. These details were dismissed as exaggeration, but their consistency across independent accounts raised concern. The voice identified itself only once, referring to itself as the authority. It did not explain what that meant. It did not clarify whether the term was symbolic, organizational, or literal. It spoke as if the label required no explanation. What unsettled investigators most was what the message did not talk about. It was not political. It referenced no governments, no wars, no ideologies. Instead, it spoke about human behavior, about habits, about repetition, about belief. Fragments of the message were later reconstructed from partial recordings and handwritten notes taken by viewers. Most original broadcast tapes were erased within days, either intentionally or through routine reuse practices. What survived did so by accident. One surviving fragment included the phrase, "You are receivers, not originators." Another stated, "Your thoughts arrive before you believe they are yours." These statements were delivered without emphasis or emotion. They were not framed as warnings. They were framed as observations. Engineers tasked with investigating the incident encountered immediate problems. No known transmitter in the region was capable of producing a signal strong enough to override multiple relay towers simultaneously. No signal logs indicated an external intrusion. More troubling still, the broadcast did not behave like a hijack. It behaved like access. Internal memoranda, declassified decades later, show growing concern among broadcast authorities. One document described the event not as a signal override, but as an unauthorized access event. Another memo suggested the system behaved as though it had received instructions rather than interference. Publicly, the incident was dismissed. Privately, it was studied. To understand why this distinction mattered, investigators revisited how television signals functioned in the 1970s. Analog broadcasts traveled through a network of relay towers that received, amplified, and passed signals forward. The system was efficient but fragile. With enough power, a stronger signal could override a weaker one. This vulnerability gave rise to pirate broadcasts. But pirate broadcasts announced themselves. They interrupted loudly, used slogans, played music, sought attention. The 1977 broadcast did none of these things. It did not announce itself. It did not acknowledge the interruption. It began speaking as if it had always been there. In the months following the broadcast, reports surfaced from viewers who claimed to experience lingering effects. The reports were subtle and easily dismissed. Recurring dreams, heightened sensitivity to background noise, a tendency to wake abruptly at the same time each night. Doctors attributed the symptoms to stress and suggestion. One neurologist, however, noticed a pattern. Patients who reported symptoms described the same auditory experience shortly before sleep. A faint tone, not ringing, not static, something closer to modulation, as though a signal was attempting to resolve into sound. These episodes were not constant. They appeared during exhaustion, during moments of mental stillness. Brain scans showed no abnormalities. Hearing tests returned normal results. There was no medical explanation. In 1998, more than 2 decades later, an audio file appeared briefly on an early internet forum. It was uploaded anonymously and labeled simply, "Do not retransmit." The file was less than 30 seconds long. Those who downloaded it reported an immediate sense of recognition. Not recognition of words, but of tone. The voice did not sound new. It sounded remembered. The file was removed within hours. No original copies were recovered. Attempts to trace the uploader failed. But those who heard it reported the same disturbing detail. The longer they listened, the more the voice seemed to anticipate their attention. Pauses aligned with breath. Emphasis shifted subtly as though responding. Researchers later proposed several theories. Some believe the broadcast was a psychological experiment, a test of mass influence, attention capture, behavioral priming. Others argued the lack of political motive suggested something else entirely. One theory proposed the broadcast was not a message, but a calibration, a system testing its ability to interact with human perception using existing infrastructure, not transmitting information, measuring reception. This theory gained traction as similar incidents were reported in later years. Brief signal anomalies, voices detected in static, audio artifacts that did not behave like random noise. These incidents shared one trait. They occurred during periods of low cognitive resistance, late at night, during exhaustion, in moments of mental quiet. Some researchers began questioning a fundamental assumption about communication, that it requires intent, that messages must be deliberately sent to be received. What if some messages do not need to be sent? What if they only need to be detected? If the 1977 broadcast was such a phenomenon, its implications are unsettling. It would mean the system did not need to invade, persuade, or threaten. It needed only access, and access was already present. The television was never the target. It was only the interface. If that is the case, the disappearance of the broadcast becomes more understandable, not because it was dangerous, but because acknowledging it would raise questions with no safe answers. The official explanation has never changed. A technical malfunction, a prank, an anomaly. The files remain sealed. The source remains unidentified. And yet fragments persist. If you have ever heard something in static, a pattern that feels intentional, a voice that seems familiar without being recognizable, you are not alone. It is probably interference. Probably. Case file 21 remains unresolved.